We didn't build this tower for no reason. So let's put it to good use. And in today's episode, I'm going to take you through the journey of ours. Novu, Noevu, Noevu. I can't say it, but we're going on the journey. Make sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you are new. Let's go. Now, of course, I will be following the quest page. And the first item we're going to need to make is a novice spellbook. Now, this is pretty simple to make. All it requires is a couple of iron tools and a book. And we have all of those things, resulting in the novice spellbook being made. So what does this novice spellbook do? Well, it allows you to create and cast spells, but only of a tier 1 variety. So the choices are a little bit limited here. However, we can upgrade our novice spellbook to the mage's spellbook, which allows us to do tier 1 and tier 2, which broadens the horizons of what spells we can craft and cast. Now, we don't get the attributes of these spells off the bat. We're going to have to make them and learn them. But to do that, we're going to need to go and find some archwood logs. And luckily for me, there is some not so far away from our home. So once we had collected our archwood, we could then look into getting the scribe's table, which will allow us to make the glyphs, which is simply just some gold nuggets, archwood slabs, and some logs. With the table acquired, it's time to find it a home. And there was only one place for this magical table, and it was in the mage's tower. And once I'd placed the table, it was time to make our first spell. And with a lot of failed attempts, we finally managed to get our first spell, which was a digging spell. However, we're not going to stop there, because there are a couple of spells that I want to make. One of them is the Magelight, for better lighting, so we don't have to carry around torches and use them for decorative reasons. The next spell I want to make is a dash spell, so we don't have to use the umbrella. Another spell I'm going to be making is a damage spell that will kill most mobs in 1 to 2 hits. And the last spell that I want to make is a self-healing spell. However, we're going to get this one to automatically activate, and I'll show you how a little bit later on. With that being said, our first spell is the Magelight, and for that we need to learn the glyph called Conjure Magelight, and it's going to ask for 2 items, one being a lantern and the other being a torch. Now, when you get these items, all you do is throw them at the table, and the table will consume them. And once you've thrown both items at the table, it'll start writing a note, and out pops the glyph. And then you eat the glyph, and then you'll have Conjure Magelight learnt. Now we're ready to make the Magelight spell, and the combination is Projectile, Conjure Magelight, and Amplified. And just like that, you have made the Magelight spell. So pretty. Now on to the next spell, which is Dash, where we're going to need to learn 2 new glyphs. One being Leap and the other being Bounce. However, we're going to need some very special items for these glyphs. And the first one we're going to make is Leap, and we need Air Essence. How do we get this Air Essence? We're going to need a thing called Imbuement Chamber, and it's very simple to make. For the Imbuement Chamber, we're going to need arch wood planks and some gold. And because this is a multi-block structure, we cannot forget the pedestals, and we're going to need 8 of them. But the pedestals require source stone, and the source stone requires source gems, and we don't actually have many, if any, source gems. So it looks like we're going to have to generate some source, and we do that by making a couple of source jars. In fact, we actually got lucky and we got it from a reward, and we're going to need a source link. And there are different options here, but the one we're going to go with is called Agronomic Source Link. This is because it generates source whenever a plant or a crop is harvested or growing. Once we'd got our source link and a couple of extra jars, we threw them down by our mystical agriculture farm and let the jars fill up. And once the jars had filled up, we placed the source jars near the imbuement chamber and throw in some lapis inside the imbuement chamber, and over time it'll craft into source gems. However, we've already got a couple of source gems from claiming quests, so we're going to use the ones that we got from the quests to make the source stone to make the pedestals. And within a couple of moments, we're back at the mage tower with our pedestals surrounding the imbuement chamber. And as I was getting everything ready to make the air essence, I realized we don't actually have any Wilden wings, and we need them, 1 for the essence and 2 for the leap glyph. And the only way around this was to make 2 things. 1, the ritual brazier, which is just a pedestal, source gem block and a couple of gold. And then I had to make a tablet of summon Wilden. Now, what does this tablet of summon Wilden do? It just spawns the different type of Wilden creatures, but it can also spawn a Wilden boss later in the future that we will probably end up fighting. And to get this tablet of summon Wilden, all it was an archwood log with an emerald block, iron sword, a bow, and a lapis block. So pretty simple stuff, because I had to summon them a couple of times to get a couple of extra wings. When we finally had all the wings that we needed, we could then make the air essence. And all it took was a feather, Wilden wing, any sort of arrow, and a source gem in the imbuement chamber. Now, the weird thing about this is it doesn't consume any of the items on the pedestal, just the source gem. And when we had the air essence, we could then make the leap glyph. Now onto the bounce glyph. And the bounce one required 3 slime balls and an abjuration essence. And the abjuration essence required milk, sugar, and a fermented spider eye. All things we can get quite easily. We then put them 3 items on the pedestals and a source gem in the imbuement chamber, and out popped an abjuration essence. We then throw that in the scribe's table with 3 slime balls, and once it had done a little bit of scribbling, we had our bounce glyph. And the way we make the dash spell is self, leap, amplify, 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 and then bounce at the end. And now we can launch ourselves around the map without any consequences. Now onto the penultimate spell, the damage spell. And we only have to learn 1 glyph for this spell, and that is delay. And delay is a redstone repeater, a clock, and a manipulation essence. And we can make the clock and throw it straight in. And the manipulation essence is just a stone button, a clock, redstone, and a source gem in the middle. And while we're waiting for the manipulation essence to be created, we can make the repeater. Throw the repeater in and grab our manipulation essence. Throw the manipulation essence in and grab our delay glyph. And then we're ready to create the damage spell, which consists of projectile, harm, amplify, amplify, delay, harm, amplify, amplify, delay, and harm. And that is the damage spell. And this spell is actually pretty powerful. Now onto the last one, which is the easiest one to create. However, it doesn't end when we just make the spell. And it's a self-healing spell. We're going to need to learn the heal glyph, which is pretty simple, a little expensive. However, this is a tier 2 glyph. It requires 4 glistening melon and a golden apple. And I have the glistening watermelon and I have the apple. And lucky for us, it also takes an abjuration essence, and we can reuse the items we had before, and we can throw the essence in. Now that we had heal learned, the spell is self heal and amplify. That's it. And this is where the tricky thing comes into play. We need to make a enchanted book called Reactive. And this is added by the Ars mod because you can bind spells to the reactive book to put on your armor, which basically means if I get hit, there is a chance that the spell that's bound to the book will activate on its own. And to create this book, we're going to need the enchanting apparatus and a few more pedestals. And don't forget the arcane core to make the enchanting apparatus work. Now we're going to use the enchanting apparatus to make the Mage Bloom seed, because we need the Mage Bloom fiber to make a blank parchment. And once we had got the blank parchment, we could then put the blank parchment on the scribe table, select which spell in our mage book we want to bind to the parchment, and shift right click on the parchment to bind the heal spell. And for the final time this episode, we can use the enchanting apparatus with a source gem block, lapis block, and our parchment with a book in the center, and it'll make a reactive book with the spell bound. We can then head over to an anvil and put it on our chest plate, and I can't really prove how this is gonna work because we don't really take too much damage. So I don't know if it does work, but you'll just have to trust me. But that's going to do us for today's episode. If you have enjoyed today's episode, make sure to smash that like button. If you're new around here and you want to subscribe, please do. That would be amazing. And I will see you all again very, very soon. Goodbye.